What's up, nerds? I'm Wes.
I'm Tom.
Today we're taking a look at Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off. Not to be confused with Tiny Epic Galaxies, even though it is basically the same game.
So Tiny Epic Galaxies is mostly like a reprinting with like new art, new graphic design of Tiny Epic Galaxies. We will talk a little bit about the differences, but also we're going to just kind of talk about Tiny Epic Galaxies because maybe you haven't played it yet, and maybe you didn't watch the review we did like 4 years ago where our camera quality was terrible. We didn't even put B-roll or pictures up there. It's garbage. Don't watch it! I actually really enjoy this game a lot more than I would have thought because, again, initially I'm like, what? You roll your dice, know your actions? So many terrible games have that as a mechanic, but this one is not a terrible game.
If you're not familiar with the Tiny Epic line, that's basically gambling games' claim to fame other than Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, which is subjectively their best game ever made. But Tiny Epic is a line of games that all fit in this size box where they try to pack as big a game as possible into this little tiny box, often sacrificing component size to do it. But this is without a doubt the best game in the Tiny Epic line.
Oh yeah, hands down. It's definitely Galaxy. For me, it's like Galaxies first, then West is a pretty close second. Quest might also be up there. I also like the new Defenders. Even just the original Kingdoms was pretty good.
I will give the caveat that Quest is still my favorite, even though I'll admit that this is the better game. And that doesn't have to make sense to you. It makes sense to me. Pirates is also awesome. It's not out yet.
Pirates is the only one I haven't played.
So it is essentially a dice chucker where you've got your dice and you start with 4 and you roll them and you activate the actions on them. So you lock in and then you can spend resources to re-roll all your dice if you don't like what you have. As the goal of the game is victory points, but you do that by acquiring, planets into your galaxy and then leveling up your galaxy, which gives you more dice and more ships to go out and get more planets.
So it is dice action selection ultimately, where basically you roll your dice and the game tells you, since you rolled this, these are the actions you get to take this turn. Now, a lot of people may not like that idea. Oh, it's very luck-based. I'm just going to roll and not get very good faces. Well, there is a decent amount of mitigation where you can spend a die to change the face of another die to whatever you want it. There is a resource of energy to let you re-roll, but it's not Yahtzee rules, so you do have to be a lot more strategic with how you spend your die. There's also something called culture, which lets you copy other people, but I know we're saying all this stuff, and you're like, well, Tom, I still don't know how you play. What do you do? What are the actions you spend? Okay, well, he said that the main way you get points is by planets. One of the biggest things is you launch a ship, you have some ships, and you either land on a planet to get this special ability, fun, but the main way you do is you orbit the planet, and you can spend other dice to advance up that track, and once you advance all the way up to the end of the track, boom! You get that card, it's yours, and you have the special ability.
Absolutely, and like Tom said, there's the thing called culture, which is probably one of the most important things to tell people when you're teaching this game, is culture. Never run out of resources. It's right. A game that
never go down to zero.
When you're at 0 resources and you're just so pigeonholed, because without energy you can't re-roll your dice, and without culture you can't follow people. So the first 3 slots of this track and then the converter, there's a way if you don't like your dice face, you can pay resources and then change another die to whatever face you want. But if you have culture, I can do those actions on Tom's turn. Like when he says, I'm going to do this rocket ship, I'm going to pay a culture, and I'm also going to do a rocket ship. And I don't have to do the same thing that he does. He could say, I'm going to do a rocket ship to come over here and start orbiting this planet. I'm like, well, I'm going to do a rocket ship, and I'm going to come land on this planet and activate the ability. Or if he's trying to, move up a track, and I'm ahead of him on the track, I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep following you, and you're not going to get ahead. So, that's not only is it super important because you get more actions during the game, it also is part of what makes this game great, because in a 4-player game, you're not waiting for it to come back to you. When you have culture, you get to be engaged at every single turn, and not only do you get to be involved, but you also get to put pressure on those people of I'm going to follow you. You do that, I'm going to follow you, and it's not going to go well for you.
So you do start with 4 dice as you level up your little player board, which is something that you can do. You can get up to 6 dice, but as he said, only the first 3 die you spend, or if you use the converter, is followable. So now, and I think that's new. I don't remember that being in the original Tiny Epic, the original Galaxies. So that's a new way of like thinking about, maybe I should do this first, because he probably isn't going to copy that, but if I do this, he is going to copy that, so I'll make sure that he can't copy that. So that's like the biggest difference we could find in the rules of the game.
There's also the abilities on the planets, because they went from being text-based to all symbol-based, making this game essentially language independent. It does make it so that you don't get to do quite as like advanced actions.
Yeah, they nerfed the abilities a little bit.
Just like in this, it's like, you know, lose a die to gain 2 energy, or lose an energy to go up 2 on a plant track. Whereas before, it could be like, when an opponent does this action, you choose between this or like...
For each culture that you gain through this thing, you can also gain that thing.
Yeah,
you know?
so because there was text, they were able to, one, make a lot more unique abilities, and also a little bit more interesting abilities.
Yeah, they had more like design space. But most other things that... I mean, well, that one has an expansion, so there's that. But yeah, most of the things are just like... graphic design and component wise, like you see the dice are a lot bigger here than in
these cards are
Tiny
actually
Epic.
bigger. Like all of Gamelin's other cards have like standard size. They actually have like a Tiny Epic sleeve for these big cards. These are actually bigger than that, so don't expect to sleeve these with those sleeves.
And I actually kind of like that. One of my complaints about the Tiny Epic games is that they're always like these teeny tiny little components. I always feel like they're small so that they can fit in that box, and I don't think that's a good enough reason.
They're small to a point of it being a detriment to the game.
Yeah, you're like,
but even like you can see like these 2 rockets, you probably can't see, but I'll post a picture of it. Like this one, it's a little bit more cartoony, but it is a little bit bigger. So that's definitely a positive. As far as the graphic design changes, I personally like the original one better. It's a little bit more realistic, less like this one is a lot more like cartoony. Obviously, we love Tiny Epic Galaxies. It's an amazing game. I think it should be a staple in every game collection. A couple questions you may be wondering. If you have Tiny Epic Galaxies, should you get Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off? Absolutely not. It really is the same game. It's got a redesign. They've maybe streamlined a few things.
even these little... So this one rule change that we brought up, you could do that in regular Epic Galaxies.
Yeah.
Right? Like...
Now, if you don't have it, you definitely buy one of them. If you can only find one, like, buy it. Don't be like, well, they said this one was better, so... No, like, it's a great game. Either way, again, mechanically, it is the same game. Again, Tiny Epic Galaxies, this one also does have the Beyond the Black expansion, which makes the game even better, although it does make it a lot more... Like, this is a good intro game to teach someone. Once you add the Beyond the Black expansion, it definitely starts working its way out of intro game territory.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely like a game at that point.
Yeah.
But I love it. I think that the Beyond the Black expansion is kind of essential. I'm curious to see if they would add an expansion for this version, in which case then at that point it's like a coin flip. You know, if you could get that in the expansion or this in the expansion.
Which artwork do you like better? Is what the question you would ask yourself. We're going to have a link to both of these down below. You have to buy one. Like, if you have one, buy the other one. If you don't have either, buy them both.
We're also going to have a link to our original review of Tiny Epic Galaxies just so you can see how shitty it is.
How much we've grown since... You don't have to watch the whole thing.
Like, in weight. We've grown in weight. Also, there's going to be a link to Game Toppers for this dice tower, for the shirts we're wearing. There's just so many links. Click on all of them.
Either way, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you'll never be bored.